welcome to another episode here on Cap Tech. A lot of folks have been asking me, Josh, why not make a best stories edition that's focused on Carbondale in the late 90s? My friends are like, we were there, and hence we don't remember it. Please tell us what went on there. So this video is going to attempt to do that. It's not a top 10 list per se, but it's going to take you through some of the memories and just the overall bizarre, maybe perfectly normal college experience that I had. So stay tuned. So I did want to start out with a disclaimer. A lot of the fun stuff that happens to you in college, you can't really talk about, at least not publicly, even 20 years later. So, having said that, there's some censorship that we have to adhere to. We also, it's many years later, a lot of people, including myself, are married, and you got to think about your kids learning all this stuff, and then, of course, there's things that you can't talk about just because of the law of the land. I don't want to sit here Googling statute of limitations on various things all day. Anyway, so I just wanted to, before people called up and said, how can you leave, story XYZ out, I just kind of wanted to get out in front of that comment here. So throwing in my disclaimer. Now let's get started. When I arrived in Carbondale, I was an innocent 19-year-old, had only lived with my folks, and just didn't know a darn thing. And I just like to give everybody the context to that, because you have to kind of look at it as, what's this innocent kid going to dive into, and the kind of the ridiculous nature of what comes from there. So I like to kind of just give everybody the context and the paradigm of how I'm looking at all this stuff. So, interesting story, not necessarily funny, but kind of ironic. So I'm in Carbondale, been down there a few weeks, didn't really know anybody, saw a few familiar faces from home, but one day I went for a walk over this bridge pictured here, went to a football game, wasn't even going to go really, it was just walking around checking it out, ran into a kid from Ottawa that brought me to a party. And had a great time, had some people from Ottawa and a bunch of new people that were there, and it was just an absolute happenstance. Never really saw this kid that I ran into again that drugged me to that party, not much anyway, and just happened to be out for a walk. If I wouldn't have went for a walk that day, maybe I would have ended up transferring up to ISU or something and not fit in, I don't know. It's a walk that dictates the rest of your life, and most of the ridiculous things that have happened to me ever since, and it happened right on this bridge. So anyway, let's get into that. So, the party that they brought me to was what would go on to be known as the Washington Street House, because of course, party this cool, I would have to just get out of my dorm and move in with these guys. So I went over to the Washington Street House to go to this party. There's naked people filled with permanent marker. There's a guy being thrown through a dining room table. There's a kegerator. One of the guys named Frankie, who I would end up getting his rooms, Irish-Mexican guy, had signs on. He's a drummer, and he had signs over the ceiling that said, "Practice your rudiments," which I didn't even take down when I ended up moving in that room. I figured, dedication, So it was an introduction to living with a rock band named Throttle, and they had a crowd of girls they ran around with called the Horseshoe Posse that I'm still friends with a bit, and it was just the first time ever living somewhere that fun. And the house, this is that house, and it looks a lot better now than we had it. Okay, so the Washington Street House, still a little bit innocent, 19 years old. My second house in Carbondale was at 402 Elm, and it is my fondest memories. There was a guy that lived there called the Horse that was a bunch of fun, who eventually smashed a TV in front of this house and just let it sit there for a semester and said, we didn't know who smashed it. It's in our yard. It had a tiny room, the window in the upper left there. that was so small, the size of a closet, that they tried to rent out, and we had a few people try to go in that room, and we showed it to them, and we figured if could get them real liquored up, they'd surely just like us and stay in there. But no, it was too small. It wasn't healthy for somebody, and it caused us all kinds of freaky stuff to happen. With potential roommates. A couple doors down to the right in this picture is a funeral home, and we were a bunch of college kids, and we would go crash that funeral home to grab stuff to eat. Horrible thing to do, but true. Dwayne, who lived with us and is my legal counsel now, at the last house, just parked a giant van in front of this house. Come in and shower, just hang out. It's pretty fun to go to the bars and shake his van in the middle of the night. The parties we threw in the basement with bands, live music. We had a stage down there. Just awesome. I remember Horse smashing a vacuum cleaner on the wall, yelling FSU, if you guys don't know what that stands for. And then I was out on the porch of this house once and saw the worst driver in history. So he's blaring AC/DC, and he's trying to pull out of a parallel parking spot, I guess, and he's just keeps smacking the car in front of him and behind him. We're drinking on the porch. He laughs and just throws us the horns, turns up his AC/DC, and drives away. I mean, it wasn't our car, so we didn't care. We had a great firecracker war with the neighbor where it was totally fair game to just launch bottle rockets at each other and each other's houses. It looked like World War III over there sometimes, or World War II anyway. We used to bring a giant speaker outside and prank call people on the stereo out there, and people would gather. It was just really a great time. I think that covers most of the stuff in 402 Elm. So by this time, got a couple years, and we've really gathered quite a bit of a crew. We've got the great Tom Graff, always call him Rational. The Clarks from nearby Nashville. Friend of mine called Davis. We talked about the horse earlier. Clarence, who I'm sure has to remain incognito. Got a senator's daughter in the mix. Can't say much more about that. Marcus, Theo, Ballard, Stovetop, Lady, J-Ro. There's more. We look older today, and there's a few of us that weren't there that day, but we won't get into how to identify that. Anyway, having a crew this size, makes it impossible to go anywhere quickly because you're always traveling with 20 people. But it's pretty handy when it comes to having a good time. So I'm giving give a shout out to my crew in this here video. You're saying, all right, Josh, that's fine. Thanks for telling us where you lived and the little adventures you had there and giving us that context up till now. But what, pray tell, did you do for fun outside the house? Well, let me tell you. I don't know what exactly we were angry at. Was it the drinking age, or I don't know. It's the easiest life, best life's ever been. So it's hard to tell what we were angry at. When you're that age, you're angry, I guess. So we would riot, and people would turn cars over. Not us specifically, but if you ever look at Carbondale Halloween or Carbondale in the 90's, and even further back, you'd never know it, but rioting is a hoot, especially when you're young. It's basically just drinking in the streets. There is some tear gas. They do throw it at you, and you run off and then do it again. Some people go grab the goalpost. I wasn't one of them, but it's once you do get the taste for tear gas, it's an adventure you want to see again, and you can really it's really an eventful night for a kid that age. Another fun time outside the house was when we were pulling out of a parking lot over at the old Detours bar. And the horse got into it with a carload of fellas and had a beer stein crashed upside his head in the parking lot. And then there was the time that I was told to go save my buddy Clarence's life at the Arboretum, but it turned out that he wasn't drowning, but still made for a fun night. So some other good memories to cover here. A few of us at one point decided to join a really underfunded fraternity under the condition that we wouldn't do anything, that we wanted something for our resume. And there was a rumor that in the frat house that we pledged actually burned down, and they went and talked to one of my roommates to see if he burned it down. And to this day, we just don't know. we already talked about prank calls on the stereo. That was mainly calling the El Greco pizza, the El Greco Euro place, and seeing if they had pizza, and they'd get mad because we'd do it a bunch every day and put it on the stereo on the front porch. And to let you know how it was back then with our liquor, we would try to go buy like 4 or 6 beers at a time, and the liquor store would literally heckle us and would look at us and say, "Why are you going to buy a 6-pack? You guys know you'll be back." And we would say, "No, we're just drinking a 6er. It's Tuesday." And yeah, we would come back. Anyway, if you're getting heckled by your liquor store clerk, maybe you're drinking too much. So, in closing, once a Saluki, always a Saluki. The friends that I made there, I still have now, and my friends, till the end. And it was a magical time, and I'm sorry that I can't make the video a little more informative, but when it comes down to trying to cut this video, I do realize that most of our stories, even 20 years later, are probably still inappropriate to tell. But anyway, told you what I could.